This chapter talks about the tables and figures in a scientific article for health research. So far, we have looked at the components of the introduction and the methods sections of a scientific research paper. Before looking at the components of the results section, in this video, we will discuss the most crucial element of the results section and perhaps of the entire research paper, the tables and figures. Tables and figures are an integral part of the scientific article as they give an overview of the study findings. For many readers, reviewers, and editors, these are the first element they will look at when reading a paper. Therefore, well-designed tables and figures are an effective tool to convey findings and can make a great impression on the readers even before they dive into the paper. When planning to write a paper, it's a good idea to plan early which findings you want to display as tables and figures. When designing a table, the most important aspect is to make the table standalone or self-explanatory. The reader should gain a complete understanding of the message you're trying to convey just by looking at the table. In order to help with this, tables must have an informative title and descriptive column headers and row labels. Tables should also have a footnote which explains any abbreviations and details on the statistical tests and analyses used to obtain the results presented in the table. Most importantly, tables in a scientific article should be organized in a way that readers can easily and quickly digest the information presented. Here are some tips for formatting. First, designing the table layout with 3 horizontal lines in total. 1 line at the top of the table, 1 line below the column headers, and 1 line at the bottom of the table. Drawing horizontal and vertical lines inside the table is highly discouraged. The number of the columns should be kept to a minimum. For example, instead of having a column for the p-values, you could consider using significance codes to indicate the level of statistical significance, for example, using different numbers of asterisks. Whether the p-values are one-sided or two-sided should be specified. Some journals suggest only reporting two-sided p-values unless a one-sided test is required by the study design. And when reporting p-values or confidence intervals, the statistical test used to obtain the values needs to be described. The units of measurements for the study variables should also be reported. For example, age in years or in increments of 10 years, BMI in kilogram per square meter, or physical activity in minutes per day. Finally, it is discouraged to over-stylize the data in a table using the bold, italic, and underline options. So a figure is useful when you have a lot of data that you'd like to describe or when you like to convey a key message. Deciding between a table or a figure depends on what kind of information you're looking to present. If your data is representing a trend, pattern, or association, a figure may be able to convey the information more efficiently than a table. However, if it is important to present the exact numbers for the results, tables are more suitable to display these results. Like tables, figures also need to be standalone. So they must have a detailed title and descriptive labels for the Y and X axes. Figures should also have a legend explaining any symbols, colors, and line types, as well as a footnote. When constructing figures for a scientific article, keep in mind what is the main message you're aiming to convey with the figure. Also, when designing figures with colors, consider using color combinations and palettes that are accessible or color-blind friendly. For example, ggplot2 package and R includes some color-blind friendly palettes, and there are many other online examples of these. Avoid using unnecessary grid lines inside the graph or plot, except for a reference line when necessary. For example, this may be a line indicating a hazard ratio or odds ratio of 1.0 in a forest plot. Another critical point is to be mindful of the scale of the graphs when placing them side by side. When you have side-by-side graphs or plots, make sure to use the same scale across the graphs and figures. Finally, avoid designing complicated, confusing figures such as three-dimensional graphs. Figures should quickly and clearly convey a key message, and readers shouldn't be struggling to digest and understand the figure. In research articles in epidemiology or in population and public health, generally, Table 1 presents the sociodemographic and/or clinical characteristics of the study population, stratified by the levels of the explanatory variable. For research papers based on a large survey datasets, Table 1 includes descriptive statistics such as counts, proportions, as well as means and standard deviations. So Table 1 allows readers to compare the variables of interest across the levels of the explanatory or exposure variable and can help readers to gain a better understanding of the research question. Table 2 usually presents the results of the primary inferential analysis assessing the research question. In other words, the association between the main explanatory and outcome variables under investigation. If there are multiple models used or additional outcomes were considered, multiple columns can be included in this table. The footnote for the table usually includes information on the analytical model, the variable selection approach, and the relevant test of significance. This table generally reports the effect of the exposure or the specific level of the explanatory variable on the outcome after adjustment for potential confounders. Figure 1 is most often a flowchart showing how the authors obtained the final study sample after going through the inclusion and exclusion criteria. The inclusion and exclusion criteria should be detailed, and the exact number of people excluded at each step should be provided. Additional tables may present the results of the effect modification analyses or any other sensitivity analyses that provide additional clarity to the study, and other figures in epidemiological studies may include directed acyclic graphs, survival curves, forest plots, histograms, box plots, and maps. Common pitfalls include having too many tables and figures. Many journals usually restrict the number of tables and figures that can be included in the main article. And more importantly, having too many figures and tables can be distracting. In addition, each table or figure needs to be explained in the text of the manuscript. Even when you have opted to include some tables and figures in the supplementary materials, they need to be explained in the main text. And as for the other sections in the manuscript, you need to find a balance between too much and too little information. Another pitfall is having duplicated information. Sometimes the authors present the same data in a table and a figure. Tables and figures should be supplementary to each other and to the text in the article as to emphasize the key findings and to convey a continuous story. Finally, some overall tips for tables and figures in a scientific article for health research. First, when describing concepts in your article, be consistent in your use of keywords throughout the text, tables, and figures. This is particularly important if there are many terms used in the literature to describe a concept. As mentioned previously, all tables and figures must be referenced in the text and should follow a chronological order. There shouldn't be a table or a figure that is not cited in the text. Sometimes, you may have too much information in the manuscript, which causes it to exceed the word limit set by the journal. When this information is essential for the manuscript, in some instances, you may be able to create a table to describe some of this information in the table or in the footnote of the table, rather than having to describe them all in the manuscript. Note that some tables can include both the text descriptions and the results. Additionally, if you have a target journal in mind, you can review the journal instructions as formatting requirements for the figures and tables may differ by journal. Finally, there should be a coherence between the text in the manuscript and the tables and figures. The tables and figures should have a meaningful connection to the text in the results section and to the story you are trying to tell in your manuscript. Please have a look at the chapter for more examples on constructing tables and figures for a scientific article in health research.